Alright guys, well it's Saturday. I sold the 720 today to get more money for this project and a little for Christmas. So I looked at the engine all week and I was trying to figure out, I was going to have to move the transmission up 4 inches, and this engine was going to be sitting super high, which I don't have a problem with the engine sitting high in the engine compartment, but I just didn't really like the idea of moving everything up that high. So what I've done today is I've removed the bumper, I've taken the engine out, the tranny's on a tranny jack, and I said screw it, I'm cutting the front inner fenders and core support off. I need to be able to get in there to be able to fabricate the engine mounts and do this the right way. So screw it, I'll cut it. If it has to go back in, it's metal, I'll weld it back later. So what are you going to do? You got to have room to work. So I'm going to cut it out. Alright, the whole front end is taken apart. I've even taken some time and ground down all the extra stuff on the firewall, so if there's no sharp edges, and I clean cut the trans tunnel on the firewall. That way everything's done there. Now what I've got to do now is take and cut off the old motor mounts. Now they are some structure in it to go to the upper control arm, so once I cut it, I'm going to use a grinder to cut a nice straight line on top. I'll plasma the sides, ground them down, and then I'll box it in with a piece of metal so it doesn't lose any strength. So I'm going to do that before we get to making any new mounts. Let's get the old ones out, get them cleaned up, and then we can go on from there. So last night, as usual, I ran out of welding gas. So I closed it down for the night. Luckily, I know a guy that sells it out of his house. And I went over this morning and I picked up a fresh bottle. So we were going to pick up right where we left off last night. And we're going to take and finish completing the gussets for the center cross member to the shock towers. And then we can start working on motor mounts. Alright, so we got everything prepped to put this engine in and start fabbing up mounts, but one thing we remembered is the reason we couldn't go low like we wanted was because of this cross member. So what we're going to do is I'm going to lay it out, I'm going to notch it at a 45 so it has a deeper part here, and then we're going to put an extra piece down here for reinforcement. So what I'm doing right now is I'm laying out center, a little wider than the balancer. Now you understand, the balancer is going to sit here, the widest point's here. So if we go a little wider, there's no way it's going to hit here. So I've given it about an extra ½ inch on either side at the widest point. Of course we're going to be down around the small area, but better safe than sorry. So I'm doing a layout right now, and then we're going to take and cut it, and then we're going to make the reinforcement down here. So what we did is, after we notched this to keep the strength, we took this 2x3 heavy wall box tubing, capped the ends. We were smart. We actually welded the caps on before we did it under there, so I didn't have to lay under there and try to weld the caps on. So we did that first, then I clamped it and I welded this in. So now this is probably stronger than it was stock. So the relief cut didn't do anything to the strength of it. So what we're going to do now is swing the engine in, stab it back in the tranny, put the headers on. Now the only reason we're putting the headers on now is so if we need to move the engine forward or back before we make mounts, we need to be able to see where the headers need to be. So if we need to go forward or back, we can do that now, and then we can go ahead and make the mounts and button it down. Okay, so we leveled out the frame. It turns out putting 2x6s on the rear tires too made it sit perfect. So now we put the engine in, and then we used a tranny jack or a jack on the tranny to level and square the motor. So now the frame's level and the engine's level. So now we can start mocking up our actual engine mounts because everything's good. And we're going to mark a center line on the mounted balancer. We already have a center line on the frame. We'll line that up so that our mounts are equal. Alright, well, while I was getting ready to start mocking up mounts, Austin was putting the headers on to check clearance. And it's a good thing we did because the shock towers are in the way. So, by moving the engine down, we've come into all these different problems. But, not a big deal. We wanted to go to a double eyelet shock versus the one that was on here anyway. So, we're just going to cut the tops off the shock tower, cap them. Won't be a big deal, but that's what we got to do first. Alright, so I want to show you guys this welding kit from Dirty Dingo. Okay, so what we have are the two engine plates, the ears that are going to go to it, all the grade 8 hardware and everything. Now I'm going to show you how this thing goes together. Alright, so just like that, your bushings and everything are in, okay? So the way this works is slide the bolt through, over here, and there. Of course, washers and nuts. Okay. So what I'll end up doing is putting this on the mount, squaring it up, and then I'll tack it on. Okay, pretty simple. Now these guys here go to the frame. Now I won't put them just straight, I'm going to put them in a slight angle for strength, and I weld them out there. So as you can see, this is my frame mount. Okay, so there, this side's going to be on the engine. And there you go. Pretty straightforward and simple. We just cut these to fit whatever we need. Now, we finally got the headers on it and everything. It was a fight and a half. We've got the steering run through them. We got clearances, everything else. It was pretty interesting. It's tight. Those are S10 headers from Hooker. We were able to make them work, so I'm glad because didn't have the cash to buy other headers. So that's a plus. So, alright, well, we're going to start mocking this up, tacking these up, getting them in place. We'll have everything tacked, and once we know it's good, we'll disassemble it and go from there. Now, the biggest problem we're having right now is this engine's hanging from a chain and it's wanting to move left and right, so to get a true center, it's all over the place. So what I've done is taken a piece of wire, wrapped it around twice on our mounted balancer, and using speed clamps here to clamp the wire on different spots in the frame so the engine can't move back and forth on me. So that's what I'm doing here. The rear's on the jack, it's not moving. So this way I can keep it dead center here, and it's going to be even. The engine's in. It's all anchored in. Mounts look good. Training mount, actually all we had to shim it up was 1/4 inch from the original training mount. So that worked out great. We put a plate in there, not a big deal, welded it right in. So one last thing I want to do before I call it for the week is plasma cut out the floor in the truck. Now this floor is riddled with holes from over the years, and I kind of overcut the tranny tunnel because we cut it for the engine up high. Now the engine's down lower and there's tons of room. So I'm just going to go ahead and take it out. This will help me for putting a cage in it, and then I'll be able to build the floor out. Nothing like the 37, just something simple. Quick frame, sheet metal, doesn't need to be nuts. So alright, before we wrap it up tonight, I want to talk about a couple safety items. One thing is with the grinders. Alright, when you're cutting on a grinder, you shouldn't be any farther than straight up to 90 degrees here of the work area you're working with. If you start working on the opposite side, what happens is it can bite. And when it bites, it's going to shoot back at you. If you stay on this side and it bites, it's going to shoot away from you. So that's something that I really want everybody to focus on, especially if you're like me and you don't run guards, okay? I've got the scars to prove it. You need to be careful with it. The other thing is, whenever you leave a plug-in grinder, you set it down. Turn it upside down and set it on its back. Okay, the reason is you never know if you're going to unplug it, plug it back in, and it's turned on. If it's on its back, it's not going to dart off and do anything. The other thing is the buttons are normally on the side or on this side, so if you turn it upside down, there's no way it's getting hit, so you're fine. So that's a tip I just wanted to share with you guys. Well, we got the engine in, bolted down, headers on, steering through, shock towers cut off, floor cut out. I mean, got a good amount done this week. I am stressing on timeline and budget, that's for sure, but I got some leads on some good parts, a donor truck and some other stuff to wrap out the rest. So hopefully they all pan out and I'll have them all here this weekend. So I just ran in the house and did the drawing for this month, and Barnyard Racer 07, you won this month. So email me at brokebastardgarage@gmail.com. Give me your shirt size and your address, and I'll be sending you out a hat and a shirt. Alright? Well, that's it for the week. So you guys know the drill. Like and subscribe. You want to see other videos? It's over here. Alright guys, stay tuned. See you next week. Caleb, you got gloves on?
No, I can't.
Do me a favor. Scratch my ass for me.
He was actually getting ready. He was all ready. Yeah, what do you mean to do?